This is the rocket pod that goes on top of the Landmaster. Looks like this on the real one. To make this look right, I'm using the brass tubing that's been cut and drilled on a jig I have in the machine shop to position the rockets so they're just below the lip, so they look they'll look a little more accurate. And casting this up in resin, the odds of getting that edge that tight is pretty slim. So I figured I'll try it this way. You have the rockets in the front and the little output chutes in the back. Obviously you have to seam those areas. Now I've drilled their size this way, and they're drilled on center that way. And the idea was to put the pivot rod in here and glue it up, but no matter what, it was all fidgety and I couldn't get these absolutely parallel. So I drew up this really quick because I already know the dimensions, because all this was designed on the computer. I drew up this and cut it on the laser cutter and glued it together. Movie magic. There you go. So that's still in frame. Anyway, so I glued up this alignment rig where I take the two tubes. I think they need to be deburred. This is the second time I've done this. So I'm just deburring the drill hole. Same thing here. There we go. What I'm doing is I'm just sliding this in and bottoming it out on one side. When I glued this little wood fixture together, I made sure it was absolutely square. I used machinist square, but you know, there you go. But a lot of times this stuff just takes a few extra minutes, but it makes your life so much easier. So now I'm just putting the rod in there, like that. And the rod sits flat on the crossbeam there, so I know that is squared up also. So as long as everything's square, it should look nice. For some reason it doesn't. This one might have been drilled wrong, but that's okay. I'll fix that. If it doesn't look right, it's not worth pushed out the wrong side. Push out this side. These holes should be like, they're all drilled on the same fixture, so they should be all the same. That just looked weird. So I'm loading it back up again. Obviously this is the first fixture that I made adjustments so I could get the rod in and out. I didn't allow that on the first pass through. There it goes. There it is. Now it's all straight. Just have to drills have a habit of wandering if you're going through thin walls. So. Okay, everything looks nice and straight now. So we can see that we're all nice and straight, but how do we hold that pin in there, and how do we remove that pin to assemble it into this? And this is where the fun begins. So we're going to go back to our plumber's putty here, epoxy putty. Put on our gloves. Just need a little bit. Back in the tube. Take off the film. Could it be that these gloves are too big for me? Alright, that's a good mix. So now what I'm going to do is just take a couple wads. Don't want too much because we have to fit the back pieces in. But we want enough to make a seat in there so the rod stays aligned. So I'm just going to take one of my tools, or even the end of a paintbrush. Perfect. I'm just going to stuff that down on there. Obviously it's going to move around when you do this, and you're going to come back and wow. Okay, the hole fills up fast, so use tinier bits. Get in there. Definitely going to come back and make sure that edge is cleaned up before the stuff sets up. And you want to put it on both sides to make sure you capture the rod completely, because that's the entire seat for this thing that'll keep it all aligned. Okay, and again, we want to make sure that it's all, nothing sitting on this edge, otherwise we have to come back and do a lot of cleanup. I'm going to reseat, make sure these are absolutely flat and square, and the rod is sitting flat on the cross beam. This cross beam right here because that dictates that it's not catawampy. And we know that these barrels will now stay parallel with each other as this sets up. Just make short work of it. How come this one doesn't look like it's... I think I have too much in there. God, I love these things. I have a whole slew of dental tools. And I keep on going back to this paint mixer because it's got a beautiful wedge on it. This is the 20-minute epoxy, which is really good. And it's okay for it to ooze out the side here because we got to fill those holes anyway. Once this does come out, we have to take that rod back out. But it's so narrow, the surface tension usually breaks it loose. If you wanted to, you could wax it up, or just, you know, touch a soldering iron to it and it'll back out really easy. You don't want to be grabbing onto it with a pair of pliers and torquing it out because it has to pass through that 1/8 inch hole that's on the launch mount. Okay, I'm going to let that kick off. I have to go to work, do a favor for somebody, and I'll be back and we'll continue. Okay, the putty's set up, so I'm going to push these back out of here in parallel, of course. And looks like the little nubs of putty are still there on the sides. You can see that right in there, and that's going to cause it to not want to go out. So I'm just going to shave it down until it does. Excuse me, I need my jeweler's glasses on here. And we push it out. Just like that. Look at that. That's parallel. But how do we get it in there? Easy peasy. We just twist. Just twist. And it'll come right out. Now this side doesn't want to come out, so I gotta heat it up a little bit and it'll pop right out. But you definitely don't want to be cranking on it with a pair of pliers because it's just a tube and it'll crush. But the idea now is that you don't want to change the size of this tube. I forget what the dimension is, because when you put it back together and it bottoms out, it'll keep everything parallel, but it bottoms out to the exact right size for this. It's not meant to elevate or animate, but I guess you could. But now with this off of it, what we need to do is we want to drill a small 1/8 inch hole through the putty, dead nut center. Well, it doesn't have to be dead center, because what happens is if you're trying to position your rockets on there and you push them in too far, you can't get them out unless you're pushing it in that way. So gotta be careful of that. The next step in this is to get these parts fitted and aligned. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to put this back in the alignment rig. Okay, it's all lined up. These blocks here are alignment marks for top dead center of the top rocket here. So if we need to make a line that goes from here to here that aligns everything. Actually, we just Don't need to make a line on it. We could just do it. Oh, I left too much putty in here. That's why it doesn't want to stay in there. I'm having to clear the, so much for that blade. Clear the, there we go. So what we can do is we can leave it in here and use it for the alignment of how the rockets line up in the tube. We want to make sure that the exhaust tubes line up with the rocket noses right there. I'm going to get that closer. So I'm going to sit here and do that entire glue up, and then we'll jump back in with the rest of it. It's going to have to be seamed, so I'm wondering if I do all that seaming and pre-painting first and then get back to the assembly of this. Because we have some vacuum form parts, there's a shield this sits in there. It's like a tray underneath it. I'll show you right now what that looks like, and that's what these are. Just to add that little extra bit of detail on there. Then we have our, the rest of it's pretty simple. It's just this post goes into the turret tower here, and that just goes into the top of the machine. So I'm going to go ahead and do this glue up and then seam it. So I'm going to stop talking now and I'm going to get to work. I did it! I pushed it in. Remember what I said about drilling a small hole in there? Because I just shoved the gun or the rocket ends in. Ooh, don't do it while it's in the fixture either, because you're going to drill into the connecting rod tube. Had to run down to the garage to heat this up and pop it out. Now, fits. But you see, I accidentally shoved that in there, so I got to drill a hole in the back end here. I've had too much coffee today. Alright, that's too much putty. Probably could use half that amount and get the job done. But now I'm just going to take this and push it out with a stick here. But you see how the hole got into that hole there. Whoa! Am I even in the frame? I'm sorry. Sorry. Anyway, that got stuck down in there. So now I'm pushing it out with this. So that's all. Widen out a little bit. Don't have to be in microscopic view. What's in here? Oh. Alright. So there's a hole in that one. Let's put a hole in this one too. I got junk on my desk now. I'm not going to sweep this on the floor. I'm going to suck it up with a vacuum. It's not plugged in. Alright. Right here. Okay. Done with that drill. Put that on the ground. Let's grab all of our junk and bring it back into the frame here. Alright. So, we want to glue all this stuff in place.
Now I re-grew these and remolded them because I didn't like the way they looked before. I'm just making sure that they're correct. These are correct. Sorry. That goes there. And that goes there. By doing it this way, it just takes the thinking out of it for me. If you just do it all visually, it works well. There's a nice little facet line from the printing process that shows. Oh, I got side view, but it'll help me line that up. I could easily, you know, make a pencil mark on there. I would really like a mechanical pencil, but I don't have one. I haven't used a mechanical pencil since I switched to CAD. That was when I was a young person. And the same thing here. Just need to find the top dead center right there. And I just want to have it inset ever so slightly. So I don't think that I'm going to be using thin CA on this. I'm going to be using thick stuff because the thin's just been getting all over the place on me. Is there enough light on this? Can I do that? Yeah, a little bit of cross lighting. Okay, I just pulled my pencil box down and it hit the ground. What about that? Does that help? No, it just adds another shadow there. So I'm just going to put it up high. Kind of go sideways. Blasting off this ruler. So I'll do one and then match the other. So if my glue's not all choked up again. Putting it on the inside of the tube so it doesn't squeegee off if I was to put it on the part. Just inside that, just ever so slightly. Maybe about 1/16 of an inch to get the look I'm looking for. Ah! Pushed it in too far. And of course, it got stuck. Oh man. Try it again. So the stick pushing back out method doesn't work when it's in the when the pipe's in there. So you just have to be super careful and not push it too far away, the way in. Far the way in. English is not my first language. And that's where I want it to be, right there. While I'm on the, what do you call these? The nose cones, I'll do the other one also. Make sure it slides in. Put a little bit of glue on there. Okay. Now for the back end. Make sure they fit in there really nicely. Something screwing that up too. Probably some putty left in there. Yep, right on the edge. Get rid of the putty. Now these bottom out, so it's not a huge deal. So watch what you're doing. We just want to make sure that they're in the correct position. And if there's any play in it, you want to make sure that it's not leaned to one side or the other. That's absolutely straight with the rest of the build. So. And again, I'm using super glue just for speed, but if you want to use a different type of slower setting glue like an epoxy to make sure everything lines up better and you're not committed straight out of the gate, that would work too. And I'm just going to put some accelerator in here. Just to make sure. Super glue is a finicky stuff. Now I'm just going to push this back. And we have two rocket tubes. And I'm going to check and see how straight my back end is. Looks good to me. Put the tube back in and do that. You can see that it's straight and parallel. So obviously, I'll probably just glue these together and make sure they stay put. But we're not finished yet because there's that piece of detail that I'm showing you the picture again for. Now that's the magic of editing, but I gotta bring up my computer display and see where I need to cut this piece. So I'm gonna pause the camera and look at pictures. Okay, I'm back from looking at pictures. Let's see. First things first, I'm going to punch an 1/8 inch hole in the side of this vacuum form piece because there's divots in there and that'll help me line this up. I have to ask myself, do I have an 1/8 inch drill bit? Yes, I do. Stuff's just 20 thou plastic, so I'm just going to spin it by hand. Alright. Now I'm going to take my scissors . This riser right here is for the vacuum form skirt, so I don't need that. Now, I don't know if you can see it on the screen or not, but there's a small part line that goes right through here. I'm going to go ahead and cut that. There's multiple ways of doing something like this, but I'm just going to use my good scissors. Yes, I have Tamiya scissors, but they're good. So, and I only use them for cutting really soft stuff. When you cut plastic with scissors, trick is never cut all the way to the end of the scissors because it'll cause it to snap, the plastic to snap. I'm cutting it a little bit proud of the of where I want to be because I can always sand it down into position. This part back here, this gets cut. So it's a tray, as in the pictures that we saw. We have to cut this hoop out too. And I always like to use a Dremel tool for this type of work. Just does the job cleaner. Looking for an abrasive bit. Here we go. And I gotta change my collet. The dental bits take a different collet than conventional Dremel tool bits, which have an 1/8 inch shank on them. This is just a burr. It's a rough sanding burr. I just remembered, if I cut here on the inside of the line, the part will be the correct shape and size. So that line right there, I'm just going to score it. If you had a good pair of cuticle scissors, do this with that too. You just run the knife all the way down that, but not through your fingers. That would hurt. I'm putting little to no pressure on this. This is just sheet styrene. And it could fracture pretty easy. Alright, now I'm just going to take my sanding stick and sand. And in the end, we realized that I messed up and I have to do this again. Because it sits right here behind man, it looks like I'm short. I'm gonna have to redesign this. The front part should be there, but the back part should go all the way to here, according to the pictures that I have. But it's a tray that stays underneath there like that. Also, I cut off this little gusset right here that's supposed to stay there. So, I'm going to cut this one out. Plus my tubes are too long. No. This is correct. Everything on this is correct. This part is not. Probably happened is I'm going back to the oops. I'm going back to the pictures real quick. Stand by. Well, after looking at a bunch of pictures, my little vacuform pieces are wrong. These should sit farther forward, and the pivot tube hole needs to be in a different spot, about 2 millimeters back from that. These tubes are too long. These rocket exhaust tubes need to be flush with the back of this. Just looking at a few pictures and put them right there. I just, you know, I've taken so much time in between working on this that a few things have escaped me. So anyway, I'm going to have to just remake that vacuform master just to redo these. Everything else is good, so happy with that. But I'm going to end it here because it's kind of straightforward as to what's going on. I'll just revisit it later on with correct ones after we make some molds, and you know, it's going to take a day or two, so I'll get back to that. But in the meantime, I'll just seam this up, and you know, you get the gist of what's going on here. So I seam these and prime them up, and they yeah, really nice. I'm going to leave this one as is. I can accept the fact that they are a tad bit long for the mount. I could change this out at any time because it just snaps into the top of the back section, which is over here. Top section, and back out a little bit. It's all been primed. Has the guns on it. And this just goes right up here like this. Slides right in. I have those vacuform trays made, and should be nice. If you glue the tubes together, they'll pivot together. I don't know if they'll stay. You might have to put a grub screw in there or something, but and these vents need to get glued in place there. So now we're sitting pretty good. Here it is. All right, I got a bunch of wheels to paint. So signing off.